The story of Paul and Silas in jail is one of the stories that I've heard in Bible studies and from the pulpit many, many times. While in jail, Paul and Silas' feet were put into stocks, and they were put into chains behind the bars of the innermost cell of a Roman jail. Then they started singing and praising God, and an earthquake opened the chains, and all the doors in the jail swung open. Then you have the jailer who almost kills himself because he thought his prisoners had all escaped, but then realizes that everyone is still there. Then he and his household become believers in God. But what about the rest of the story? At the beginning of the passage, we find a female slave who had a spirit by which she predicted the future. She made a lot of money for her owners through fortune-telling. In Acts, we find out that this girl is following Paul and Silas around, shouting at the top of her lungs, "These men are servants of the Most High God, who are telling you the way to be saved." Then we read that after days of her yelling this, finally Paul became so annoyed that he turned around and said to the Spirit, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her." Then the Spirit left. It is in this instant we see Paul acting as Jesus did in the Gospels. He commands the Spirit to leave, and the Spirit leaves. It is only when the owners of this woman realize that she will not be able to make money anymore through fortune-telling that they get angry with Paul. This is when they took them to the authorities, the magistrates. However, they never accused Paul and Silas of doing anything to the slave woman. First, they try to make the authorities and crowd have a prejudice towards them by first naming them Jews. Then they accuse them of advocating a non-Roman custom in their city. It is then that the crowd joins in together and attacks them. So why did they go to jail? Were they found accused? Did they go to jail just for crowd control and for their own safety? Let's go back to what the action of an exorcism to this woman actually means. Yes, in the Bible, possessing someone being possessed by a spirit usually means something bad. I don't think I want to have a spirit possessing me either. But what about her slavery and owners taking advantage of her to make a profit? Her owners using her to make money made this woman no longer human, but an object. She follows Paul and Silas around, proclaiming them to be servants of the Most High God. And it isn't until Paul gets annoyed that he commands the Spirit to leave. Paul's actions did not just get rid of the Spirit, but it gave this woman her humanity back. It was an act of justice. Paul, feeling annoyed, finally made him realize that she was not just yelling about whom they were, but also crying out for help. These men are servants of the Most High God who are telling you the way to be saved. Do I need to scream? There's a song performed by the band Zoe Girl called Scream, and here are some of the words. Do I have to scream for you to hear me? Do I have to bleed for you to see me? 'Cause I grieve, you're not listening to me. Do I need to scream? Has anybody seen what's been done? Where was my defense? No one heard my protest. The eyes of God were watching me. It's time to make my peace. Let it go and be released so I can breathe again. I'm on my knees. Do I have to scream? Sometimes there are those who are screaming who need to be heard and answered by us. Last week, I pulled up my Netflix account to watch a movie or TV show, and instead of going to one of my TV shows that I'm currently watching, I looked to see what was popular on Netflix and to scroll through the lists. And I came across a documentary, which I don't usually watch documentaries, that interest me. It's called Bully. It is a film made in 2011 that focuses on bullying in the United States. The film follows the lives of 5 students, and I became disgusted when one child did not even know he was being bullied, when children were punching him and threatening him on his ride to and from school. While watching it, I saw some of the students crying out through their actions, through their whispers, and in the case of the boy on the bus, through their silence. But when I sit and think of this documentary, I have to ask myself, am I hearing and seeing their signs, their cries for help, because I am watching a movie about bullying? When bullying happens, whether in school, in our group of friends, or at work, the target of the bullying is having his and her or her humanity taken away from them. A bully physically and emotionally brings that person down, abuses them until the bully feels powerful over the target of the target of the bullying. And those who are being bullied are crying out for help from their peers, from their teachers, from their principals, from their ministers, from their family, from their friends, from anyone that will hear their cries. They are screaming, though maybe we cannot hear it. They are crying out, sometimes in a whisper. Please set me free from this. Do I need to scream? Slavery has been illegal in our country for many years, but it is still seen in our country or through our businesses, sending production overseas to sweatshops that are basically modern-day slavery. Human trafficking is all over our country today. Globally, trafficking in persons is one of the fastest growing criminal activities, second behind drug trafficking. And here are some hard statistics about human trafficking. The United Nations estimates that 2.5 million people around the globe are in forced labor. An estimated 1.2 million children are trafficked each year. 161 countries are affected by human trafficking by either being the source, a transit point, or the final destination. In 2006, there were only 3,106 convictions for human trafficking, which means that one person is convicted for every 800 persons who have been trafficked. The Salvation Army claims that human trafficking annually generates an estimated $7 billion worldwide. Online prostitution advertising generates approximately $33.6 million in annual revenue. An estimated 293,000 American youth and children currently are at risk of becoming victims of commercial human trafficking exploitation. The majority of these victims are runaway or thrown away youths who live on the streets and become victims of human trafficking. Human rights investigations discovered minors were sold an average of 10 to 15 times a day, 6 days a week, totaling between 9,360 and 14,040 acts a year. 12 to 14 is the average age of entry into human trafficking. These stats are disturbing, and they're even hard for me to read aloud. Some of these stats you may have heard or maybe something similar before. But those stuck in slavery and trafficking sometimes are not able to speak up and cry for help. Some of those who come to our country through human trafficking are brought here with a promise of freedom in the United States. after they worked for those who brought them for a few years. However, they are either forced into a drug addiction or are told that they are in debt too much to be able to be set free. Some cannot speak up for themselves for fear if they speak up and no one is listening, they may lose their lives. Through a whisper, they are crying out, "Please help us. Set us free." Do I need to scream? There was a news video that came out recently that I was watching this week about guest workers that come through an organization to work in the United States and to experience a new culture, to experience our culture in the United States. They were brought over and made to stay in a basement, 8 to 10, in a room of poorly made bunk beds. Their landlord was also their boss. And their boss would not give them the 40 hours a week they were promised in their contract. So they had to be on call to get enough money to pay the rent to their boss and to pay for food. Others were made to work 2 or 3 shifts in a row without a break. In this video that I saw, they were picketing on the streets and using social media to get their cry out. "We are being treated poorly. Someone please hear our cry." Do I have to scream louder? How often do we hear these voices? Is it not until we get annoyed with them, as Paul did, that we act? Or are we sometimes too narrowly focused to notice those truly in need to have their humanity given back to them? I have to admit that I am not always the best at hearing these voices, at seeing these signs, to hearing these cries of help, these whispers that cannot speak up loud enough for me to hear, even though it is clear. It is not until someone brings this up to me that I get really passionate and upset with our culture and myself for not hearing these clear cries of help. There are times that I act as Paul did, out of annoyance, or maybe persistence of those cries. Do I have to scream for you to hear me? Do I have to bleed for you to see me? Because I grieve you're not listening to me. Do I need to scream? I pray that I can be given the courage and strength to answer those screaming for help, those crying for help. I hope that we can say, "Yes, we hear you, and you will be set free."